Hello and welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neal Howard, here on Health Professional Radio. A brand new study from the journal Circulation was published recently and found that fish oil may be especially beneficial right after a heart attack. Our guest in studio today is Dr. Bill Harris, founder, president, and CEO of OmegaQuant. And he's here to discuss some of the services offered at OmegaQuant and these findings of this recently published study. Welcome to the program, Dr. Harris.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm talking about this study that's just been published. Could you go into a little bit more detail about the findings?
Sure. That study was centered in Boston. It was first the primary author was Raymond Kwong, who's a cardiologist, and he organized a study where he took about 320 people who had a heart attack and did a cardiac MRI on them to look at the cardiac structure within about 2 or 3 weeks after their cardiac event. And then at that point, he randomized them to 4 grams a day of high-dose omega-3, the pharmaceutical omega-3 product called Lovesa, or placebo, and followed them again for 6 months to see how things would go. Then did another MRI of the heart. And what he found was that those in the fish oil group showed improved what they call remodeling of the heart, that the left ventricle was not as scarred as badly, and it functioned better in the omega-3 group than in the placebo group. So this is a nice demonstration that higher levels of omega-3 after a heart attack could be beneficial and help maybe reduce risk for future heart failure.
Okay, reducing risk for future heart failure. Are we talking about reversing and healing of this scar tissue and the effects of a heart attack?
Well, I think we're talking about prevention of developing scar tissue. In this particular study, again, they didn't start the omega-3s till 2 or 3 weeks after the heart attack, which in the next study Dr. Kwong wants to do, and I think it's appropriate, he wants to start the omega-3 the day after the heart attack, as soon as possible, and that makes a lot of sense. So when the heart is going through its initial recovery and healing, that's when you need high doses of omega-3 on board. So we should see benefit, even better benefit, if we do the study that way. Our lab was involved with the study as well because we measured the omega-3 index in all these patients and correlated it with improved left ventricular function.
Was OmegaQuant involved in the study that found that cardiac patients who received omega-3 fatty acids before surgery fared a bit better after surgery? Were you involved in that, and could you talk about that study?
Yeah, so that study that you're referring to was a meta-analysis, so meaning it was a summary of a variety of other studies. It wasn't its own standalone study.
Okay.
So it was a survey of other studies, and they averaged out the results of a variety of studies and did find that people who'd been given omega-3 around their time of cardiac surgery, open heart surgery, had shorter hospital stays and actually reduced risk for postoperative atrial fibrillation, which has been an area of intense study in the omega-3 world. So that's a good finding that we think the omega-3s are beneficial. Actually, we're right now doing an analysis on a study looking at the effects of omega-3 on bleeding risk. There's always been a little concern about bleeding in omega-3, which is misplaced in our view, because we think the omega-3s actually help reduce risk for bleeding instead of increasing it, and we've got some data to support that now.
Now, you're talking about reducing the risk of bleeding as opposed to, I guess, the popular belief.
Right.
If that's the case, then what would you say, in your opinion, is that one thing or maybe a couple of things that have contributed to this shorter hospital stay in addition to reduced risk of bleeding?
One is probably the general anti-inflammatory effects of omega-3 that are systemic, and how that exactly plays out in affecting a length of stay. Frankly, I couldn't tell you. I don't know how that would work, but people just heal faster, seem to be a little better off with the omega-3s on board. They are able to resolve some of their inflammation quicker, and that may have contributed to the shorter stays.
Now, OmegaQuant is located in South Dakota. Talk about some of the services that are offered by OmegaQuant.
Yeah, OmegaQuant is a laboratory, and we have a very special focus is on measuring blood and tissue and breast milk levels of omega-3 fatty acids and other fatty acids as well. So we work with researchers both in the United States and around the world who are doing studies that have where knowing the levels of omega-3 in the blood are important. And so we get blood samples in from big research trials. We also get blood samples in on dried blood spots that come in from consumers who order a test on our website. We also work with doctors who use the omega-3 index tests in their practices to help guide their treatment of patients.
Now, you mentioned a website. What is the address?
Yeah, it's simply OmegaQuant.com, OmegaQuant.com.
We talked a bit about prevention, the prevention of the second heart attack after the first. Can fish oil just simply reduce the risk of heart attack in the first place, even if I've never had a heart attack?
That's what I believe. I think that's true. We haven't really got a good study to prove that because nobody's going to. That kind of study would require maybe 5 or 10 years or 15 years of treatment with omega-3 or a placebo, and then see who develops heart attacks. And nobody's going to do that study. So based on simply levels of omega-3 in the blood. In population studies, we can see that higher levels of omega-3 are associated consistently with a reduced risk of death from any cause. So people just live longer with higher omega-3. And also they have reduced risk for heart disease and maybe some other, and dementia, we think. Interestingly, the Japanese, who have the highest omega-3 levels in the world, also have about the longest life in the world, the longest lifespan. So it doesn't prove anything, but it's consistent. Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neal Howard, and we've been in studio talking with Dr. Bill Harris, founder, president, and CEO of OmegaQuant. It's been great having you here with us today.
Thank you very much, Neal. Enjoyed it.
Transcripts and audio of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm, and you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.